The show is set in the year 1962, in a parallel universe where the Axis powers, comprising Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, won World War II and now rule the entire world. In this timeline, US President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt was assassinated during the war, and the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki never happened. Instead, the Germans dropped an atomic bomb on Washington, D.C., weakening the Allied countries. Now, the Germans control all of Europe and Africa, while the Empire of Japan rules over Asia. However, the real center of power is in the former United States, which has been divided into two regions. Western North America is governed by the Japanese, while Eastern and Midwestern North America are controlled by the Greater Nazi Reich, also known as the GNR. The American flag now bears a swastika instead of stars, symbolizing the country's complete surrender to the Nazis. Although Germany and Japan won the war together, their alliance has since turned into a tense Cold War. It is said that after Hitler's death, his successor will seize control of all Japanese territories and declare himself ruler of the world. In both empires, Americans are treated as second-class citizens, facing extreme racism and fewer rights than their German and Japanese rulers. The police have absolute authority to kill any American they deem suspicious, without consequences. Between the two occupied territories lies a neutral zone, stretching across the Rocky Mountains. Here, neither empire's laws apply, making it a safe haven for a resistance movement that continuously fights for freedom. We are then introduced to Joe Blake, a young man living in Nazi-occupied New York. Tired of being a slave to the Nazis, he seeks to join the resistance. After gathering information from various sources, he finally uncovers the address of the New York resistance leader. As Joe makes his way to the meeting point, we see Times Square plastered with Nazi propaganda and massive billboards glorifying the Führer. The so-called headquarters turns out to be a shipping company, run by a man named Don. When Joe reveals his intention to join the resistance, Don initially laughs in his face. Simply finding their address already proves Joe's determination, but Don fears that someone like him might give away their secrets under pressure. Joe insists that his resolve is strong, and Don ultimately gives him a chance. For his first mission, Joe is assigned to drive a truck loaded with coffee machines to Cannon City, Colorado, a location within the neutral zone. When he asks what else the truck contains, Don refuses to answer, instructing him to follow orders without question. Just as Joe prepares to leave, the Nazis raid the shipping company. He manages to escape, but Don is captured and arrested. The raid was orchestrated by Obergruppenführer John Smith, the third highest-ranking Nazi officer in the region. Smith was once a U.S. Army captain before switching sides and pledging allegiance to the Nazis. As the Nazis investigate Joe and his truck, Smith learns of the situation and begins to take action. Smith orders his men to capture the truck at any cost. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to San Francisco, a city under Japanese rule. Here, we meet Juliana, an Aikido expert and an American who has adapted to life under Japanese control. One day, after practice, she is approached by her friend Doni, who has a crush on her. He asks her out for coffee, but Juliana gently declines, revealing that she already has a boyfriend named Frank. Later that day, Juliana reunites with her sister, Trudy, who has been missing for the past week. Trudy seems unusually excited and claims that her life is about to change for the better. That evening, Juliana meets up with Frank, a talented artist. However, because the Japanese disapprove of modern art, he has taken a job as a mechanic in a factory. As they talk, we learn that Frank is Jewish and constantly lives in fear of the Nazis. This fear is why Juliana is hesitant to have children with him. She doesn't want them to grow up in a world where they are hunted and oppressed. After their date, Juliana is walking home when Trudy suddenly stops her. Frantically, she hands Juliana a film reel, insisting that it holds the key to freedom. Before she can explain further, she runs off only to be gunned down by the police moments later. Juliana, horrified, rushes back to her apartment and plays the film. Titled The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, the footage shows an alternate world where the Nazis were defeated and how global politics unfolded afterward. Juliana is in shock. For the first time, she glimpses a life beyond oppression. The film ignites something inside her, a desire to fight. Had she been shown an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians instead, she might have chosen to leave things as they were. Soon, we learn that the film is distributed by a mysterious figure known as the Man in the High Castle. Even high-ranking officials don't know his true identity or motives, but he appears to be an ally of the resistance, possessing access to things most people don't. The government has banned these films, but they continue to circulate underground. When Frank arrives home and discovers the film, he panics. He insists that they turn it over to the authorities first thing in the morning to avoid trouble. The next day, Juliana finds a ticket to Cannon City along with an address and a time. It becomes clear that Trudy was meant to deliver the film there. Now, it's Juliana's responsibility. While Frank is away, she makes a split-second decision. She takes the film and heads to the bus station. To avoid suspicion, she hides it beneath another film reel, ensuring that even if she's caught, the original tape won't be found. Meanwhile, at the German embassy in the Japanese-controlled empire, a high-ranking Nazi commander, Hugo, meets with Japanese Trade Minister Tagomi. Tagomi informs him of the impending arrival of the Japanese prince and princess. Even the German embassy must be decorated to suit Japanese tastes, much to the Germans' displeasure. Still, they comply to prevent any diplomatic tension. Elsewhere, Don has been captured, tied up, and tortured. Obergruppenführer Smith and his right-hand man, Eric, whose name is significantly easier to pronounce, arrive to interrogate him. But despite their efforts, Don remains silent and unshaken. Meanwhile, Joe's truck breaks down due to a flat tire. A kind passerby helps him fix it, but as Joe waits, he notices ashes in the air. The man casually explains that the Germans are burning mentally and physically disabled people as they don't want to waste resources on them. Looks like you can't teach an old genocidal cult new tricks. Shaken but determined, Joe continues his journey until he reaches a police checkpoint. In a moment of panic, he grabs a film reel hidden in the truck and quickly stashes it elsewhere. The officers search the vehicle but fail to find anything suspicious, allowing him to pass. Like Juliana, Joe's mission is also to deliver a film to someone in Cannon City. When Juliana arrives, she meets a man named Randall, the person Trudy was supposed to contact. Randall is a resistance member and immediately doubts Juliana's capability, believing she isn't suited for the job. They argue over who should deliver the film, but ultimately Juliana insists on doing it as the recipient expects to meet a woman. On the way to Cannon City, Juliana faces another setback. Her bag is stolen by a woman who takes all her money and the fake film she had prepared as a decoy. Despite losing everything, Juliana refuses to give up. She continues her journey, determined to fulfill her sister's mission. Back in San Francisco, Frank is at work discussing politics with his coworker, Ed. However, their conversation is cut short when both Frank and Randall are suddenly arrested. The authorities suspect them of hiding the film from the police. Juliana finally arrives in Cannon City and checks into a hotel, waiting anxiously for the mysterious person she is supposed to meet. While in Cannon City, Juliana meets Joe, who kindly pays for her meal after she explains that her wallet was stolen. They chat for a while and quickly become friends. However, later that night, Joe makes a secret phone call to Obergruppenführer Smith, revealing that he is actually a Nazi spy. He was the one responsible for Don's arrest. Back in San Francisco, Frank and Randall remain imprisoned and are subjected to brutal torture. Inspector Keto threatens to execute Frank's entire family unless he reveals Juliana's location by the next day. Later, when Frank and Randall are left alone, Randall pleads with him not to give up Juliana, insisting that what she is doing is bigger than Frank's family. The next day, Keto escalates his threats. Frank's sister, Laura, and her 2 children are brought to the police station and locked in a room. Keto coldly informs Frank that they will all be poisoned in half an hour, giving him time to reconsider. Meanwhile, in Cannon City, Juliana and Joe's bond deepens, though Joe has started to suspect that she may be a rebel. Juliana takes a job as a waitress at a local diner where she meets a customer named Alan who is reading a Bible. When she expresses interest in it, he directs her to a store where she can find a copy. She visits the shop, unaware that Joe is secretly watching her. At the same time, back in New York, Obergruppenführer Smith and his assistant, Eric, are ambushed by a group of rebels. However, Smith manages to kill them all and capture a man named Doug for interrogation. Later, Juliana meets Alan again and tells him she has something important to discuss. They agree to meet on a bridge that night. Before leaving, she gives Joe a letter asking him to mail it to her mother if she doesn't return. Suspicious, Joe contacts Smith and asks him to investigate Alan, suspecting he may be a rebel. After the call, Joe reads Juliana's letter where she writes about the beautiful world the film has shown her, a world where freedom still exists. Overcome with curiosity, Joe watches the film he was tasked with delivering. Seeing an alternate reality where the Nazis lost the war fills him with doubt and sparks a desire to resist. Soon, Joe receives intel Alan is not a rebel but a Nazi spy, just like him. Realizing Juliana is in grave danger, Joe grabs his gun and rushes to the bridge. Back in San Francisco, Randall is taken away for execution. Keto asks Frank one last time to reveal Juliana's whereabouts, but Frank refuses to speak. As punishment, Keto orders the release of poison gas into the room where Laura and her children are being held. Moments later, Frank is also taken away to be executed alongside Randall. However, just before his death, Keto's men find the woman who stole Juliana's bag on the bus. When they examine the film reel she took, they realize it's a fake, meaning Frank and Juliana might be innocent. Frank is saved at the last second, but the damage is done. His sister and her children are already dead due to Keto's mistake. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Alan attempts to kill Juliana, but before he can, Joe arrives. In the struggle, Juliana pushes Alan off the bridge, killing him. Overwhelmed with guilt, she collapses, sobbing in Joe's arms. They return to the hotel where Joe comforts Juliana as she struggles to process the fact that she has taken a life. She asks if he read her letter, and he admits that he did. However, Juliana isn't upset. She trusts Joe and believes he only did it out of concern for her. Knowing that the death of a Nazi agent will attract more enemies, they decide to check out of the hotel separately to avoid suspicion. Back in San Francisco, Frank returns to his apartment, utterly broken by the events of the past 24 hours. He collapses into bed, his body and mind drained. His friend Ed arrives, relieved to see Frank alive, but Frank barely responds, too numb from his trauma. Soon after, he receives an official letter from the Japanese government. The police inform Frank about the funeral being held for Laura and her children. Devastated, he goes to the station to officially identify their bodies. By the time he leaves, his sorrow has turned into pure rage. He is determined to avenge his family's death at the hands of the Japanese. Frank soon finds the perfect opportunity for revenge when the Japanese crown prince and princess arrive in San Francisco. Upon returning home, he receives a call from Juliana but abruptly hangs up. He blames her for everything that happened and refuses to speak with her until his anger subsides. Meanwhile, Obergruppenführer Smith receives a call from Joe asking if he has spotted any rebels at the diner, indirectly referring to Juliana. However, Joe lies, claiming that he hasn't noticed anything suspicious but wants to stay another week to be sure. Smith refuses, insisting that if the rebels were going to show up, they would have done so by now. Their absence only means they have caught on to the Nazi plan. Joe agrees to return and heads to a gas station to prepare for his trip back home. At the same time, we are introduced to another Nazi soldier, Marshall. He is infamous for killing hundreds of rebels in the neutral zone and is a devoted follower of Nazi propaganda. Suspicious of Joe, he asks for his identification card, leading to a tense exchange between the two. After confirming Joe's identity, Marshall shows a bystander a photo of Alan, the Nazi agent who had gone missing. Realizing that the investigation is closing in, Joe quickly meets Juliana at the diner and tells her about his run-in with another Nazi spy. They are out of time and need to flee immediately. Their first priority is to find Alan's body at the dam and dispose of it before Marshall can discover it. Meanwhile, Marshall arrives at a bookstore that Alan used to frequent. The owner, Carl, pretends to know nothing, but Marshall exposes his real identity. Carl is actually a rebel refugee from Ohio. To save his life, Carl reveals that a girl had come to buy a Bible under Alan's recommendation. However, despite getting the information he wanted, Marshall doesn't spare Carl's life. He executes him on the spot, then makes an example of him by hanging his corpse in front of the store, ordering the townspeople to let it rot as a warning. Afterward, Marshall continues his search and arrives outside Juliana's diner. A local man approaches him, claiming to have information about Alan's whereabouts but demanding money in exchange. Marshall forces him to talk, learning that the last place Alan was seen was the bridge. Without hesitation, he heads there next. Back in San Francisco, the Crown Prince and Princess take a stroll through a park, accompanied by several high-ranking councilmen. After the event, the prince confides in the princess about his growing concerns regarding Nazi technological advancements. He fears that Germany has surpassed Japan in many ways and must be stopped before another world war erupts, especially once Hitler dies. In the next scene, Trade Minister Tagomi meets with a Nazi scientist named Wegener. They are negotiating a secret deal that could alter the course of history. Wegener possesses the formula for an atomic bomb, which the Nazis have but Japan lacks. He is willing to hand over this knowledge to the Japanese science minister, ensuring that Japan will be prepared in case Germany turns against them. Tagomi instructs Wegener to deliver the formula on the day of the Crown Prince's speech, as the distraction will ensure a smoother handoff. Later, the Crown Prince and Princess visit the Nazi ambassador to discuss the upcoming speech, which will be delivered to a crowd of San Francisco residents. The ambassador advises canceling the event due to safety concerns, but the prince refuses, placing his trust in Inspector Kito's security team. He is, after all, the Prince of Japan, who would dare lay a finger on him. Back in Cannon City, Joe and Juliana are disposing of Alan's car when they find a map inside. A marked location piques their interest and they decide to travel there to see what it is. At the same time, Marshall reaches the bridge and finds a drawing of Juliana, something she had dropped the night before when she was there with Alan. This mistake could cost her life, but she is too busy exploring the marked location with Joe. It turns out to be a camp where revolutionaries are imprisoned and tortured. The horrifying sight of a chained, dead woman shakes them both. Alongside the corpse, they find a list of revolutionaries, some already killed, others yet to be captured. Trudy's name is on the list, but what shocks them the most is the name of the diner's owner, Lemuel. This means that the person Juliana has been working with all this time is also a rebel. Meanwhile, at the diner, Marshall questions Lemuel, asking if he has seen Juliana in the neighborhood. Lemuel admits that she used to work for him but lies about her disappearance, claiming she vanished a few days ago. Back in San Francisco, Frank is still in a fragile mental state. He obsessively listens to the radio, trying to gather information about the Japanese prince. Later, we see him assembling a gun, something he can easily do since he works at a factory that manufactures firearm parts. Ed, noticing Frank's strange behavior, asks what he needs the gun for, but Frank refuses to answer. Later that day, Ed catches Frank practicing his shooting skills in the apartment. Carefully, he asks if Frank is planning to assassinate the Crown Prince, but once again, Frank remains silent. Concerned, Ed warns him to think carefully about his actions, reminding him that the police will show no mercy if he does something reckless. Meanwhile, Joe and Juliana are driving back to the diner when Marshall stops them. Juliana makes a run for her life, hiding inside an abandoned house while Marshall chases after her. After a tense search, they finally come face to face. Marshall is seconds away from pulling the trigger when Joe arrives just in time, knocking the Nazi out before escaping with Juliana. They find refuge in Lemuel's home, where they tell him everything. Lemuel listens carefully before asking Juliana for the film she got from Trudy. However, Juliana refuses, insisting that she will only hand it over to the man in the high castle. She doesn't trust anyone else. Lemuel promises to take them to the man the following morning. Unexpectedly, Joe contacts Obergruppenführer Smith and shares the information he has gathered. However, he deliberately omits the part where he helped Juliana. The next morning, Lemuel takes Joe and Juliana on a hike through the woods. Halfway there, they are surrounded by a group of revolutionaries who accuse Joe of being a spy. To prove his innocence, Joe shows them the film, arguing that he wouldn't have brought it if he were truly working for the Nazis. Juliana also defends him, stating that he has helped her numerous times. Realizing their mistake, Lemuel and the rebels apologize and direct them to a safe place on the other side of the hill, far from Marshall, who is still hunting them. Elsewhere, Wegener prepares microfilm containing crucial information on how to manufacture an atomic bomb. He is set to deliver this to the Japanese science minister during an upcoming speech, a speech that could change history. Meanwhile, Frank is finalizing his plan. Hours before the speech, he buys a large quantity of bullets under the name of a Japanese citizen living in Tibet. The shop owner, tempted by the large sum of money, agrees to help. Later, Ed discovers Frank's loaded gun and tries to stop him. In the struggle, Frank is shot in the shoulder, but he manages to lock Ed inside a room and heads out for the speech. Meanwhile, Juliana attempts to steal a car for their escape, but Marshall catches her in the act. She speeds away recklessly, resulting in a fiery crash. As flames engulf the vehicle, Marshall approaches and confirms that she is dead. What he doesn't realize is that this was part of Joe's plan. As the speech begins, Frank prepares to shoot the prince, but before he can pull the trigger, someone else fires first. The episode ends with Frank watching in shock as the injured prince collapses.